It begins with a line across the mountains, a line that bends, twists, and disappears into the clouds. Some say it is the longest scar on earth. Others say it is a sleeping dragon, guarding the heart of China. The stones are old, but they still whisper. They whisper about kings, wars, and dreams so big they touched the horizon. If you could walk this line from end to end, what stories would it tell you? Long ago, the land was not one kingdom. It was many, each with its own fears and borders. Raids came like storms without warning. Villages burned. Families fled. And so the rulers asked a question. What if we could build something so great that danger would never pass? The wind still carries that question along the stones today. If you want to walk this wall with me tonight, to hear the echoes of soldiers, to see the fires in the towers, and to touch the stones that still hold their warmth, stay close, subscribe, and we will take each step together, through history, through myth, through the heartbeat of this ancient dragon. Before there was a wall, there was only the idea of one, a thought born from fear and hope. Somewhere, in a quiet room, a ruler spoke the words that would change the land forever. But how does a wall begin? Not with the bricks, not with the towers. It begins with the reason. Let us go back to when the first stone was only a dream. Before China was one land, it was a patchwork of kingdoms and states. Each had its own walls, its own armies, and its own fears. The northern borders faced endless danger. Riders from the steppes, swift as wind, striking without warning. They came in the night, their horses thundering through villages, taking food, burning homes. Kings met in dimly lit halls, speaking in low voices about the enemy beyond the hills. Could a barrier keep them out? Could stone be stronger than fear? And so, somewhere in those tense nights, the idea began to grow. Not just a wall, but a wall that would stretch as far as the eye could see, tying together the broken pieces of the land. A single defense for many. They came with no warning. Their horses moved like flowing rivers of muscle and shadow, their arrows whistling in the wind before the enemy even appeared. The steppe warriors were not bound by walls. They crossed rivers, deserts, mountains. They knew no borders. For the kingdoms of the north, this was a nightmare that returned every season. Families would hide in caves or flee to the forests, leaving behind empty homes. And each time, the leaders would ask the same question. How long could this go on? The thought of a great barrier, one that could slow even the fastest rider, became more than a dream. It became the only hope for peace. In a quiet chamber, lit only by oil lamps, a ruler studied maps spread across a wooden table. The ink lines showed the borders, but they meant nothing to the riders beyond. He traced the edges with his finger, imagining a single line that could unite and protect his people. It would be costly. It would take generations. But he looked into the faces of his generals and saw only one choice: to build. If you believe walls can tell stories and want to hear them all, leave a like and stay with me. The first stone would soon be placed. The council room smelled of ink and candle smoke. Old generals spoke of battles lost, of riders who vanished into the night before they could be caught. One advisor, with hair like silver threads, told of a line of defense used by the ancients: trenches, wooden barriers, even short walls of stone. But they were always broken. What if the wall did not end? He asked, his voice quiet but sharp. The room fell silent. The ruler leaned back, his eyes narrowing. A wall with no end. A barrier the enemy could never ride around. It was madness. And yet, in that silence, the idea took root like a seed in dry earth. The plans began as rough sketches, drawn in charcoal on silk, lines that cut across mountains and rivers, dots for towers, marks for gates. The engineers argued over the impossible distances, the weight of the stone, the men and women needed to make it real. But still, the lines grew longer, the dots more numerous. If you have ever dreamed of building something so vast that it outlives you, tell me in the comments. Because this was more than a wall. It was the shaping of a nation's spine. Once the decision was made, the kingdom changed. Farmers were called from their fields. Stonecutters left their quarries. Carpenters, blacksmiths, and soldiers were summoned to a single cause. The roads filled with carts carrying tools, ropes, and baskets of stone. Villages emptied as the wall's shadow stretched farther, even before the first stone was laid. In the towns, people whispered, some with pride, some with fear. Would this wall protect them, or consume them? Somewhere in the north, the riders were still watching. Not everyone welcomed the idea of the wall. In the markets, voices argued. Old men warned that too many hands would be taken from the fields. Mothers feared their sons would never return. Some said the wall would be a tomb before it became a shield. Yet others dreamed of safety, of children playing without fear, of nights without sudden fire. The ruler's messengers moved from village to village, explaining the plan, promising that this sacrifice would mean peace for generations. In the quiet of their homes, people weighed the cost, and most agreed to give what they could: their time, their labor, even their blood. From riverbeds and mountain quarries, the stones began their long journey. Ox-drawn carts groaned under the weight. Men lifted blocks with ropes, their shoulders straining. At night, campfires flickered beside stacks of rock, the workers speaking in low voices about the wall that would rise. If you could stand here, feeling the cold roughness of those first stones, would you want to see the wall completed? Leave a like, and we will keep walking together, step by step, stone by stone. At the borderlands, where farmland gave way to wild hills, soldiers stood watch. They could see the distant smoke of steppe camps. Between the two worlds lay nothing. No walls, no towers, only wind. It was here that the first stones would be placed, each one a promise, each one a warning. The air was cold, but the work would soon begin. And, as the first block touched the earth, the question remained: could stone truly hold back the horizon? The first groups of workers came from faraway towns. They carried their own tools, bedding, and stories. Some had never seen the northern hills before. They stood in silence, looking at the empty land where the wall would rise. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. In the mornings, they trained to lift, carry, and shape the stones. In the evenings, they shared meals cooked over open fires, speaking of their families and the life they had left behind. The work had not begun, but already the land was changing. As the workers set their tents, a commander walked among them. He told them the wall would protect not only their villages, but their children's children. It would stand long after their names were forgotten. Some listened with pride, others with doubt. But every man and woman there understood one thing. This was history in the making. If you believe in building something that lasts beyond your own lifetime, share this journey so others can walk with us along the stones of the Great Wall. One morning, the frost still on the grass, a mason raised his hammer. The sound of stone meeting metal rang through the valley. Others joined in, chisels cutting, ropes pulling, voices calling out. The first stones began to take shape, their rough edges smoothed for placement. It was a small start for something meant to outlast empires. And, as the wall's foundation grew, so did the questions. How high would it rise? How far would it go? The answers would come with the building of the giant. The morning sky was pale and cold when the building truly began. Long lines of workers moved like slow rivers across the hills, each carrying tools, ropes, or baskets of stone. Foremen shouted instructions. Drums beat to keep the rhythm of the labor. From the top of the ridge, the ruler watched the first sections take form. Trenches dug for the foundations, stones stacked like sleeping beasts waiting to rise. The air was filled with the ring of chisels, the groan of wood under strain, and the scent of fresh-cut timber. It was the birth of something far greater than any one man could imagine. Each stone was shaped by hand. Men crouched in rows, striking, chipping, and smoothing, their palms raw from the work. The sound of hammer on stone was like a heartbeat, steady and endless. Water was poured over the rocks to keep the dust low, turning the earth beneath them into mud. If you could hold one of these stones, heavy, cold, unyielding, would you carry it for miles to build something greater than yourself? Leave a like if your answer is yes, because that's exactly what they did, day after day. As the wall grew, towers began to rise above it. They stood like watchful eyes over the valleys, their wooden frames wrapped in scaffolding. From inside, soldiers peered out over the land, their armor catching the first light of morning. Below, carts of stone creaked up the slopes, pulled by oxen whose breath clouded in the cold air. The towers would hold fire beacons, ready to signal danger across great distances. The work was slow, but with each passing day, the wall gained its shape and its purpose. The wall was not only stone, it was sweat, blood, and bone. Workers carried loads so heavy their backs bent like bows. Some wrapped cloth around their shoulders to soften the ropes that dug into their skin. Others sang low songs to keep their steps in rhythm, their voices blending with the creak of carts and the pounding of hammers. Every boulder set in place meant hours of labor, often under the burning sun or the biting wind. But still, they worked, not because it was easy, but because the wall was needed. Weeks passed before the first section of the wall truly stood. It was small, a single stretch between two hills, but it cast a shadow long enough to touch the valley below. People from nearby villages came to see it. Some touched the stones as if they were sacred. Others looked north, imagining the danger it would keep away. If you could stand here now, feeling that shadow pass over you, would you believe in its promise? Share your thoughts in the comments so this story travels as far as the wall itself. Every day, more wall rose along the hills. Workers climbed higher and higher, carrying stones to dizzying heights. Scaffolding swayed in the wind. Ropes creaked under weight, and the sound of labor echoed for miles. Some fell and were caught. Others were not so lucky. But the work did not stop. The wall crept forward like a living thing, devouring the land ahead of it and leaving behind a trail of stone. From above, it looked like a scar or a dragon slowly winding across the earth. Some stones came from far away, too far to carry over mountains. Instead, they were floated down rivers on wooden rafts, guided by men with long poles. The journey was dangerous. Rapids tore at the rafts, storms rose without warning, and the weight of the stone made every turn a gamble. When they reached the building site, the stones were wet, shining in the sunlight, and cold to the touch. These river-borne stones would form the heart of the wall, carrying the strength of the water that brought them. To ease the weight of the work, the builders sang. Low, deep chants rolled across the hills, their rhythm matching the swing of hammers and the pull of ropes. The songs told stories of home, of love, of battles fought and won. The wind carried their voices for miles, so that even those far away could hear the heartbeat of the wall. If you could stand on these hills and listen, you would feel history being built in every note. Share this journey so their voices never fade. The wall took more than time. It took lives. Accidents were common. A slip on the scaffolding, a rope snapping, a stone falling from above. Those who died were buried nearby, the ground around the wall holding both its foundation and its cost. Workers spoke in hushed voices about the spirits that would guard the wall, born from the souls of those who gave everything. And still the wall rose higher, the air filled with dust and the promise of something greater. What would this giant look like when it finally stood complete? As the wall climbed higher into the mountains, work became slower and harder. Cold winds swept across the ridges, carrying dust into every crack and fold. To keep warm, workers built fires along the path, their orange glow lighting the stone at night. From a distance, the line of fires looked like a necklace of flame draped across the hills. Soldiers kept watch beside them, scanning the darkness for movement. Here, the wall felt alive, breathing with the smoke, glowing with the fire, stretching endlessly into the shadows. In the stillness of early morning, before the hammers began, the wall made its own sound. Wind whistled through the gaps, ropes creaked, and scaffolding groaned. Birds circled above the towers, their cries echoing between the stones. The wall was not just being built. It was speaking in the language of wood, stone, and air. If you could hear it now, what would it say to you? Leave a comment, and let's imagine the answer together. Months of labor finally produced something remarkable. A section so long it vanished into the horizon. It ran over hills and through valleys, its stones fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. From its highest point, a soldier could see far into the north, past rivers and forests, into lands that had always been a threat. The wall was no longer just an idea. It was a presence. But what purpose would it serve once it was complete? That answer lay in the years that followed, when the wall became more than a barrier. When the first watchtowers were complete, they stood like sentinels above the valleys. From these heights, soldiers could see for miles, hills rolling into rivers, rivers into plains, and the faint dust clouds of movement far away. Inside, stacks of arrows and spears waited beside the walls, and fire pits stood ready to light the night with signals. A single blaze could send a warning from tower to tower, carrying news of danger across great distances in a matter of hours. The wall was no longer only stone. It had eyes, and it could speak. At night, the wall came alive with fire. When danger approached, the signal fires blazed, each tower lighting the next until the line of flames stretched beyond sight. The glow painted the stones gold and the sky a deep crimson. Soldiers stood ready, the shadows of their armor dancing in the flicker. If you could stand here under the fire's light, feeling the heat and hearing the crackle, would you be proud of this defense? Like this journey if your answer is yes. And let's walk to the next tower together. Once the signal fires faded, silence returned. The soldiers leaned on their spears, eyes still scanning the horizon. Far below, the villages slept in peace, unaware of the danger that had been turned away. The wall was doing its job, holding back what lay beyond, keeping the heart of the land safe. But peace could be fragile, and the wall's duty was endless. Its stones held not only strength, but also the weight of constant vigilance. The wall was not empty between the towers. Soldiers patrolled its length, walking under the sun by day and under the stars by night. They checked the stones for damage, tightened ropes, and repaired anything the wind or rain had worn down. Some stretches were quiet for months. Others saw constant movement as riders approached from the north. The wall was a living road of stone, carrying the footsteps of those sworn to guard it. Over time, the stones began to hold stories. Names were carved into them, of soldiers, of builders, of those who had died in its defense. Some marks were deep and sharp. Others had worn smooth with the passing years. If you could walk here now, running your hand along the wall, you would feel the memory of those who came before. Leave a like if you would join me in following those names, step by step, across the spine of this giant. From the highest points of the wall, the world opened wide. To the south, green fields and winding rivers shimmered in the sunlight. To the north, the wild lands stretched into a blue-gray horizon, empty and endless. It was a view that carried both comfort and warning. Comfort because the wall stood strong. Warning because beyond it lay the unknown. The soldiers who kept watch here knew that one day the fires might blaze again. Over time, the wall did more than guard the land. It guided people. Merchants began to travel alongside it, using its length as a safe route between towns. Marketplaces grew near its gates, filled with spices, silks, tools, and stories from far-off lands. Travelers carried news along the stones, and the wall became a bridge between cultures as much as a barrier against enemies. Here, the sound of footsteps was not from soldiers alone, but from the hum of trade and the voices of distant worlds meeting under its shadow. The wall was never truly finished. Even after its main stretches stood, repairs and additions continued for centuries. Each generation left its own mark. New stones, stronger towers, longer reaches into the mountains. If you could stand here now, feeling the layers of history beneath your hands, would you want to walk its full length? Comment below if you would take that journey, from the first stone to the last. The wall's power was no longer only in its height or length. It became a symbol of unity, of determination, of the will to protect what matters most. Poets wrote of its strength. Artists painted it under golden dawns and silver moons. It lived in the hearts of the people as a reminder that even the greatest challenges can be met, one stone at a time. But how would this ancient guardian live on in the world of today? That story begins in the next chapter. The wall changed with the year. In spring, wildflowers bloomed along its slopes, their colors bright against the gray stone. In summer, the heat shimmered off the stones, and the air buzzed with insects. Autumn painted the hills in red and gold, the wall winding like a ribbon through the forest. And in winter, snow covered everything, turning the wall into a white path across the mountains. Each season added its own chapter to the story of this ancient giant. Today, soldiers no longer patrol the wall with spears, but guardians still walk its stones. They are historians, preservationists, and guides who tell its story to those who visit. Tourists from around the world run their hands along the ancient bricks, feeling the weight of centuries. If you could visit, would you walk until your legs ached, just to see what lies beyond the next hill? Share this journey with others so the wall's voice keeps reaching new ears. From above, the wall still looks like a dragon, winding, resting, waiting. It has seen kingdoms rise and fall, storms rage, and countless footsteps pass over its stones. It has been a shield, a road, a marketplace, a monument. And now it stands as a reminder. Even the longest journeys are made one step at a time. So let us take one last walk together, as the sun dips behind the mountains and the wall fades into shadow. As the sun sinks low, the wall becomes a river of shadow. Its stones glow faintly in the fading light, each one holding the warmth of the day. The air cools, and the sound of the wind replaces the voices of travelers and guards. Somewhere far away, a bird calls, its echo carried along the spine of the wall. The day ends, but the wall remains, unchanged, patient, eternal. If this journey has walked beside you tonight, if the stones have spoken in their silent way, then stay with me for more paths like this. Subscribe, and together we'll keep following the trails of history, through ruins, along rivers, under skies that have watched for centuries. The wall will be here when we return, waiting for more stories to be told. Night rises slowly over the mountains. The moon spills silver light across the wall, tracing every curve, every tower. In the stillness, it is hard to imagine the noise and labor that once filled these stones. Now, it feels like a dream, a dragon asleep under a blanket of stars. And in that quiet, you can almost hear the heartbeat of the land it guards. One last glance over the mountains, one last step along the stones. The wall disappears into the horizon, but its story lingers. It has been a shield, a road, a monument, and a promise. And it will be all of these things long after we are gone. Sleep well tonight, knowing the dragon still watches. And when you return, we'll walk another path, under torchlight, in the hush, in the stories that still breathe.